Oh, I am so glad that you found your way back to the Yoga and Black podcast. But if you're new to the show, welcome. The show is all about sharing the stories of Black yoga and holistic wellness providers all around the world. And the goal is to bring more community awareness to the Black folks that not only practice yoga, but teach it too, to show our community that we too participate in these practices to help us heal and lead fuller lives. So, without me talking anymore, please, please, I hope you enjoy the show. Thanks for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to the Yoga and Black podcast. Thanks so much for being here with me, Tarani, and also Emma Kelly, all the way over in the UK. And I'm so excited. It's my first time interviewing somebody over there. Emma is a yoga teacher and meditation teacher, along with mentor. She's also an Afro spiritual researcher and a retreat host. I love when I get a multi-hyphenate on here because there's so much to talk about all of the things that you do. So, Emma,
Yeah.
take it away. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm really happy to be here and share some of my knowledge and experience. So I live in Northampton in England, which is right in the centre of the UK. And it's kind of close to London, but it's not like London at all. It's not very diverse. Um, and we have some really beautiful countryside. And yeah, so I have been teaching yoga now for, I think it's 9 years.
Nice.
I've been practicing yoga for 17 years. Actually, yeah, coming up to 18 years now. I was like, no, I'm getting so old. Um, and more recently, in the last kind of 4 or 5 years, maybe 4 years, I've been really immersing myself in learning about African spiritual traditions. So that's been a more of a new thing for me, but also a really important part of my own spiritual development because um, I'm Jamaican and white British as well. So really focusing on Caribbean spiritual
Oh,
practices
yeah.
and mainly West African practices as well. So that's kind of that and also been practicing meditation for quite some time, Buddhist traditions. Also been practicing some Hindu deity practices. I'm very interested in mantra as well
Yes.
and Sanskrit. I've done some very basic like learning in Sanskrit, but I absolutely loved it. So that's kind of like my passion. So quite a lot,
Yeah.
quite a lot of passions. And, yeah, and also, and so a part of kind of my African spiritual practices, but also connecting to the land of the UK. So actually, I spend a lot of time in nature. So nature is very important to me, the water, the trees. So I'm probably a bit witchy as well. I can maybe add that to the
Right there with you, honey.
to
Right there with
the list of things of
you.
yeah, very interesting. I'm always like when I'm out walking, I'm always got like I come home with like leaves and twigs and
Yep, all the
berries,
cool rocks.
things like
For
that.
me, it's always, oh, that's a cool rock.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that is me. Yeah, always getting distracted and like, oh, what's this? What's this? What's this? So,
Yep.
yeah, if you ever go on a walk for me, it's very long and I'll be like going off in different places. So,
Yep. Always
so
wear
yeah,
something with
that's
pockets or a bag to collect all of the things that you want to find.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. That's what I do now. I do have my little foraging bag because I'm like, actually, you never know. I never know what I'm going to find,
Exactly.
so might as well just take
Exactly.
it. Yeah,
I love
yeah, being
this.
prepared.
Oh my goodness, you just gave me so many awesome things that I want to ask about. Um, let's start with hmm, let's start with the yoga. Let's take it back 18 years. What
Mm,
was that very first experience like for
mm,
you?
mm. Yeah, so I was at university studying a social work degree, And when you go to university, they have lots of like activities, there's lots of
Mm-hmm.
sporting things. And I saw this like yoga class advertised that said it was helpful for like stress relief.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, yeah, I need
Needed.
that. So I went for my, yeah, yeah, definitely. Social work degree was very, very difficult, very stressful. Obviously, the profession is extremely stressful as well.
Yeah.
So I went to this first yoga class, and it was in a dojo. So where they do like martial arts. So it's like a
Yeah.
really bouncy floor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was very old school. So the lady who was doing the class, she was about maybe like 75, an older white lady, and she kind of had like like the old school leggings with the like little shorts over the top, kind of
Oh
like
yeah.
I don't know, yeah, like really, really, I don't know, like not quite Jane Fonda,
Oh,
but
more, is it more
similar,
Richard Simmons?
like yeah, I think so. Where it's
Yeah.
like one color tights or leggings, and then you
Uh-huh.
have the
And then
shorts
the
over the
shorts
top.
on
So
top.
and
Yep.
then like a yeah, yeah. So it was it was very it's very old school. And yeah, so it was a very gentle class. All the poses were on the floor. We did some pranayama. She did a Dharma talk as well.
Oh, cool.
So I did that first session and I absolutely loved it. I said to my housemates when I got home, I just said, I felt really floaty, I felt light, my body was just moving like in a nice way that I'd never experienced.
Yeah.
I felt really stiff in the class. I was like, wow, like, yeah, my body is not used to this. But yeah, it was really what I needed at the time. And really, actually, that's kind of when you go full circle. So I was
Mhm.
very much interested in the very gentle practices. It kind of got a little bit more dynamic when I started teaching, but again, it's actually gone full circle where it's very gentle, floor poses, meditation, yoga nidra, and just very, very, very
Yes.
chilled and very similar.
I wonder if that's a common thing because I've experienced something similar where with my first introduction to yoga was kind of that similar old school kind of a thing, but it was DVDs in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what was going on. I really wasn't paying much attention to it. I'm just like, I'm here for the gym credit. Um, but circle
Mm-hmm.
back a
Mm-hmm.
few years, I took a class where it was a hot class, but it was
Mm-hmm.
gentle enough that we weren't doing, like anything super, like vinyasa style, or like power yoga
Mm-hmm.
style. It was still, very accessible for
Mm-hmm.
everybody in the room. And there was a nidra at the
Mm-hmm.
end, and I was just in complete bliss after that. But my practice or my teaching
Mm-hmm.
practices turned into Ashtanga and Rocket Yoga at one point. And I still love them very
Mm,
much, but I
mhm,
have come back to this space where I'm
mhm,
like, I would love to just slow down, do some more,
yeah.
intentional movement and meditation for a
Mhm,
longer
mhm,
period of time at the end. Really just allowing ourselves to take our time rather
mhm.
than trying to, how many poses can I get in class? I'm tired.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think it's probably quite common where yoga teachers actually it gets I mean, yeah, it gets very simple because you get to when you're like doing your yoga teacher training, it's always about like the poses and
Mhm.
I got kind of obsessed with my body
Yeah.
and like, right, I really want to do this. I really want to
Yeah.
push myself and it's always about
A
like
goal pose.
pushing.
Yeah.
I think probably because it's the expectation of a yoga teacher that you should be like this. If
Mhm.
you're a good yoga teacher, you can do this, you can do this, you're
Yeah.
strong, you're flexible. But then I suppose you get to like realizing actually that's, well, we're all different.
Mhm.
And actually, that's not for everybody.
Exactly.
And I'm like, yeah, that's not for me.
It's
That's too much. I don't need to do that. I
yeah.
don't need to stress myself out doing hard poses. My life is stressful enough already.
Thank you.
So
See, and that's
I need my
exactly where
yoga to
I
be
was going with it
simple.
too.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Just keeping life simple
yes.
and restful, easeful, because we don't really get much of that in life, do we? Where we just feel like we can fully rest.
Mm,
There's no pressure. You just get to be,
yeah.
and there's no competitive element. There's no forcing, pushing, achieving. It's like actually it's just being and accepting. I just want to do this. I don't want to do that
Yeah.
anymore. So yeah.
1000%
Mm,
agree
mm,
on that. Oof.
mm, mm, mm,
It's
mm.
like, again, you gave me so many little tidbits that I just want to like ask so many questions on, but I'm not sure if I want to jump from the yoga to the spiritual practices or how to wean into it. Ooh, yes, I know.
I know there's a lot of different
I
things.
know. And I'm just so excited
Mm,
for all of it. I hope an hour is a long enough time for us. But no, because I remember we talked a little bit before we started recording about your mentorship, and I wanted to know about
mm,
that practice for you as well. Because for
mm,
those, like,
mm,
because you and I have been teaching for around the same amount of time, and
mm,
so
mm,
we both have been in mentor type of roles. What does it look like and feel like for
mm,
you when you get the opportunity to mentor someone?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. Um, and I love it when people ask me because it really gets me to think about what it is that I actually do. Because um, so the mentoring that I do, it's so firstly at the moment it's actually for BIPOC women.
Hmm.
So that's the focus that I'm actually um, sticking with at the moment. I have some particular reasons for this.
Understand?
And for me, yeah, yeah, I've done some other mentoring for some white yoga teachers, and it has been very different from, speaking with BIPOC women.
Yeah.
And, there's a different level of respect, isn't there?
It's just,
Sadly,
oh,
for some people, they may not.
whew. And don't
They
let
may
them
not
be older than
respect
you, too.
us in the same way. Yeah, she was older, the one I had issues with. Yeah. But yeah, so at the moment I'm sticking with the BIPOC community. And so the mentoring that I do, it really focuses on what it is that people want from their teaching or their wellness, and trying to find this balance between following your passion
Yeah.
but then also the practical steps of, okay, so now you're a yoga teacher, you're actually a business owner,
Mm.
and you want to earn income. You have people will have some challenges around how much do I charge,
Yeah.
what it is that I want to do. Think they compare to other people and say, well, I did this workshop, but I only had 3 people come. This
Hmm.
other person on Instagram has like 20 people.
Yeah.
And with the mentoring, it's actually like helping people to know the reality of teaching yoga, and what you see on social media is not the
Mm.
same as a person's business. Because
Yeah.
I've been self-employed for a long time. I have worked with a lot of yoga teachers. I've spoke to a lot of yoga teachers. I've worked for some kind of large, not well, yeah, bigger yoga organizations
Hmm.
doing their social media manager, and hearing of all the, you might see somebody who looks really successful, but they're in a lot of debt
Mm.
because they're not actually making enough money to survive and live.
Mm.
But then somebody else who's got 100 followers on Instagram, Facebook, they actually may have a really solid, teaching,
Yes.
but you can't tell from social media what's going on in somebody's life. So
Thank you.
with the mentoring, it's like actually looking, right, you're doing this, you're at the beginning, you're actually doing, like, people are usually doing better than they think. They're like, oh, I've only got this, and I'm only doing, and I'm like, that's amazing. Like, your body can only manage to do a certain amount of classes. You don't want to burn out, because also that's another thing I see. People who are burnt out, they absolutely love, sound healing. They love yoga, Reiki as well, Reiki practitioners,
Hmm.
and they come into it and they're like, this has changed my life. But the reality of earning an income and living in this capitalist society
Mm. Mm.
is a completely different thing, and it's actually really challenging.
Yeah.
But when nobody knows until you go into it, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I've got to pay the rent, and I need to, like, how do we juggle the reality, you know? And I think there's sometimes with like coaching online, because I don't really call myself a coach, but you see this like, oh, if you do this program, you're going to earn six figures in a year. And it's not
At
realistic, it's
all.
fake.
At
They don't talk
all.
about their privilege, they don't talk about how much they've invested, they don't talk about the staff that they have, they don't talk about probably the debt that have accumulated as well. They're not talking about their rich husband
Oh,
who
you
is
on that part.
supporting them.
They always
So
forget
it's
that
like, yeah, so I
part.
try, yeah, they do, don't they? Yeah, or they're at different stages in their life. So I've
Right.
done yoga business programs where, you know, I was the youngest, and a lot of people there were retired. So they'd already had a career, they'd already accumulated savings, they bought their house, and it was just more of like there was no pressure
Yes.
for their yoga teaching and the income they needed. So it's completely different for somebody like me or the people that I mentor who are self-sufficient,
Hmm.
who got to pay their own bills, they might have children, and don't necessarily have the same privilege
Right.
as a lot of yoga teachers because it's generally a white middle class profession. So the mentoring that I do, it's more looking at people's realistic situation and
Yeah.
saying, okay, let's see what you can realistically do, because you know somebody may have children, they're a single parent,
Hmm.
they may have, you know, been through a significant loss, they may have health issues, and it's like, okay, I need to get to know you to actually give you some support
Yeah.
and advice about, you know, what it is that you might need to think about. And you know, we have to be a bit more creative as well, don't we, if
Yeah.
we don't have that same privilege and
Exactly.
income and whatever it is. So yeah, it's really looking at somebody's situation and also their happiness as well. That's a really important part of the mentor, and it's actually like
Mm.
what genuinely is making you happy.
Yes.
And let's talk about that, because people might come to me and say, I really want to run a retreat, and we kind of talk a little bit about what's going on, maybe because we do have a conversation about what's going on in people's lives, because it's important. It's the context of like, okay, I don't want to just give generic
Right.
advice, but sometimes people come with an idea of a retreat, but then they'll tell me their day job is extremely toxic and they're getting bullied and they're, you know, having all
Yeah.
these things going on, and it's like, well, I think you need to address
Yeah.
the non-yoga part of your life
Yeah, because that's
rather than the yoga,
probably
because you're
right. I
getting
wouldn't be
burnt
surprised
out.
if it's fueling their desire to escape and get away.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's kind of a holistic mentoring. It's because people say like, what is it that you focus on? And it's like, well, it depends on the person who comes and what it is what's their issue at the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes these people, they come, again, they might come and say, right, Emma, I really want to do this big massive creative project, but it's like, oh, actually you're actually really burnt out, you've had a significant loss in your life recently, you need some time out to heal, and maybe this project needs to be something you come back to when you have more capacity.
Ooh.
And also, I will discuss with people, actually, maybe teaching yoga full time is not the right option now. Maybe you need to do part time work for your own mental stability, financial stability,
Yes.
and do this on the side, because it's not for everybody. It's really like, as you, do you do it? Do you do it as your full
Not
time
anymore.
income? Is that what you
Not
do?
anymore. I
Right.
did get a job,
Mm-hmm.
and I do work full time now. So
Yeah.
yoga has now become the side hustle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm really only
Yeah.
teaching one
Mm-hmm.
class a
Mm-hmm.
week, and it's not even a yoga class, it's a fitness class. So I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
haven't taught a yoga
Yeah.
class since
Yeah.
maybe like February. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. And this is the reality. This
exactly.
is what you have to do, because
Yes.
you know, and also with your, because I have mentors in the US as well, and we discuss actually the healthcare situation. Like, we have the NHS, But if you're working as a yoga teacher, freelance, I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
the exact details, but you have to think about these other really important things of like, what's your safety net? And, so,
Exactly.
yeah, so with the mentoring is like, let's be honest and realistic,
Yes.
and also really help people to achieve their goals in the way that's right for them at the right time.
Right.
Sometimes that goal is not quite, maybe there's some other steps that people need to explore before
Hmm.
they're going with this big project that,
Yes.
maybe it's 6 months time, a year's time, get prepping, build yourself up, and then this
Right.
big thing. Because sometimes what happens is people go for this particular goal
Yeah.
and it's not realistic and it doesn't work out, so they think, oh my gosh, I'm a failure.
Thank
And
you.
it's like,
Ooh.
no, you didn't have the skills, you didn't have the knowledge, and it didn't work out because you didn't have that foundation. It's not your fault. You just didn't have any support, because nobody tells us this, do they? Yoga
No.
teachers, like, oh, by the way, it can be extremely challenging.
Yeah.
And there's that, like, I don't know if it's taboo, but we're doing things on our own.
Yeah.
So we're not with colleagues and saying like, oh, we need a pay rise, or do you know what I mean? We're kind of like, who do we say like, oh, I'm struggling financially? Like, it can be quite shameful for people. So yeah, it's just talking about the realities of the, like,
Yeah.
the journey and the highs and the lows, and just figuring out what's right for the individual, because we can see things and we might see a yoga teacher and think, oh, look, like, because I
Yep.
teach yoga retreats in Morocco and India, and it looks like, woo, on social media, but there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of financial risk to it.
Yes.
And obviously we've had COVID, which completely threw things up in the air with international travel and retreats.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I'm I'm a bit of a realist. Sometimes, some people, they might want to be told, okay, I'm going to help you earn this amount of money in 6 months. And they're probably not the right people. They don't usually go with me because I don't promise. And I'm like, I've had people who have said, oh, I'm going with this coach because they've said I can earn six figures in a year. And I'm like, great,
Yeah.
but I don't know how you can promise that, to be honest, when you don't know somebody.
It's a marketing ploy, 1,000%. Like anything
It
to
is,
try to
isn't
get
it?
folks to,
Yeah.
bite into whatever it is that they're selling. And it's sad that folks will buy
Mm-hmm.
into it, have that expectation and hope, and then when it doesn't happen, consider themselves a failure rather than the program itself
Yeah.
being a sham. Like,
100%. Yeah. Do you mind me asking you, like, since
yeah.
you've like started to work full time and have yoga as the side gig, like, for you, obviously it was the right decision for you, but have you seen like the positives to actually, shifting to a more stable, is like, career and things
Yeah.
like that at this time?
Well, physically, I feel so much better because I was, real
That's
close to
amazing.
burnout. Yeah, it was a lot of
Mm,
classes that I was teaching all at the same time
mm,
because it was my sole source of income. Um,
mm, mm.
I was
How
fortunate
many
enough
were
to
you
work at a
teaching?
space. Oh goodness! At my peak, I want to say it was around 15 a week, and
That's a lot. That's
it's
that's that's
too
very
damn
difficult
much.
to sustain.
Yeah, it was
Mm-mm,
extremely difficult to sustain. But
mm-hmm,
it was a combination of working at a studio as their lead instructor. So not
mm-hmm,
only was I teaching a decent number of classes or having to fill in for
mm-hmm,
any, folks that couldn't teach theirs. I also
mm,
had admin work on the side of that,
mm,
managing this, the teaching portion of the studio, and I still
mm,
had a few other contracts that I had on my own that I was teaching too. So it was just a lot
mm,
going on all at once. And I'm like,
mm-hmm.
yeah, this is not
That's
cool.
been
But
that's yeah, that's too
yeah,
much, isn't it,
and
really? Mm,
too much. And I knew it at the time. I knew how silly it was,
mm,
but
mm,
I was
mm,
so against. I was one of those that was just like, I don't want to go back to working at a job, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
mm, mm, mm,
girl, you need to just go
mm,
ahead and do that.
mm, mm,
It got to
yeah.
a point where I
Mm,
didn't work at that studio any longer because of some things that were happening on the racial and
mm,
prejudicial
mm,
side of things. Yeah.
mm,
Was
mm,
not being treated well, and it took a toll on my health. So that was my
mm,
major
mm,
catalyst to leave it all behind, because it made me fall a little
mm.
bit out of love with yoga, and I needed to take
Right.
that time
Yeah.
to really rekindle the flame again, because yoga was no
Mm,
longer a
mm,
practice for me. It was my livelihood,
mm,
and figuring out how to
yeah.
sustain myself made me lose that
Mm-hmm.
passion a little bit. So now
Yeah,
that it's
I
been
understand.
over a year, yeah, it feels so much better to be able to know that I can practice for myself when I want to. I have a little bit more
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
financial stability so that I can discern which
mm-hmm,
opportunities are the best for me. I've
mm-hmm,
had
mm-hmm,
so many more ideas since then, and time to figure out, what ways realistically I can make these things work. Not to mention more
mm-hmm,
time for
mm-hmm.
this. And it's
Yeah.
been it's
Mm-hmm,
been a
mm-hmm,
lot better. Like, of course, I'm not too pleased about having to work again, but healthcare is
mm-hmm,
great to have.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because that's a thing over
So
here. Yeah, we
important.
we are not
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
afforded any type of healthcare as yoga instructors.
mm-hmm,
Not to mention, this country just doesn't really
mm-hmm,
make it easy for you to get it. So
mm-hmm,
even if you
mm-hmm,
are
mm-hmm,
self-employed, or employed as a
mm-hmm,
yoga instructor, and really kind of fueling your own income here in little bits and pieces at different places
mm-hmm,
here and doing this there, it's too expensive to be able to afford half the time if you're not married and
mm-hmm,
on your spouse's insurance through their job or something.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
yeah, a lot of
mm-hmm,
those realities really are just like, you hit the nail right on the head. Folks really do need to sit in that reality. um
mm-hmm,
I'll expound a little bit on my own experience, because when I did first start out teaching full time, I essentially retired myself and took money out of my 401k to cover my bills and,
mm-hmm,
do all the things that I needed to do so that I did have that stability and just be able to grow this thing as organically as I possibly could to see where it would go. And when I realized that
mm-hmm,
I was doing well enough, I'm like, okay, let's just keep this going. But COVID changed a lot.
mm-hmm.
So having to,
Yeah.
maneuver around that and figure
Mm-hmm,
out,
mm-hmm,
ways to recoup, it took some time
mm-hmm.
for me to realize, like, what happened before COVID is not going to be the same as what was happening during and after. Well, I
Mhm.
can't even say after COVID. COVID's still here. So
Yeah,
at least I can say
yeah,
after the
yeah,
biggest surge of it. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so it's like,
Mm,
yeah,
mm,
like that realist. And I'm very much a realist too, because I wanted to be as
yeah.
idealistic as I could, but I'm like, the reality
Mhm,
is
mhm,
your financial stability cushion is now flat.
mhm.
So you got to figure out a way to
Yeah.
stuff that thing again. So I love that you give all
Mhm,
of those
mhm. No,
tips
I
to
really,
people, because
I
yeah,
appreciate,
that is
I appreciate you sharing though, because I think it's like you said, the thing of like you like, yeah, we of course we don't want to get a job. We want to teach our passion, we want to do yoga, but
yes.
there's that point where you're like, look, you're making yourself sick. This is not sustainable.
Mm,
And it's one of the things where I've kind of gone through phases of like having other jobs on the side,
yeah.
and kind of like trying to figure out, because also maybe something that might be helpful for people out there, is actually I've had quite a lot of health conditions as well.
Same.
So from 2022 to 20 no yeah so it was kind of similar to when the pandemic started, till for a couple of years my health is improving. However, I do have quite a few chronic health
Hmm.
issues, and for me the reality is like, how do you earn enough money, look after my health,
Yeah.
like appreciate actually I don't have the same level of energy as a healthy person, And also knowing, oh, like there's a little bit of the like, it's been going okay, but there's a bit of worry of like, oh, am I going to be able to manage this?
Right.
Luckily, like touch wood, things have been okay, and things that I've planned, I've been good in my health. But we do have to consider actually, like, how are we going to navigate if we have health
Yes.
issues? We're all going to get older. Our body's not going to be able to teach what we could teach maybe like 10 years ago when we
Right.
were
A little
had all
more of
this
a
energy
spring
for
chicken. Yeah.
Ashtanga. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, yes. I suppose it's the reality of, like, yoga teachers is hard on the body. If
It
you're
is.
doing quite physical vinyasa, you're doing Ashtanga. I think for like people who are starting out in yoga and teaching, like, being mindful of your body
Hmm.
and what you can realistically do. I mean, obviously, we never know what's going to happen, and
Right.
you know, but like have it at the back of your mind of like, actually, this amount of classes, this is not sustainable. This is
Mhm.
going to cause me depletion, burnout, whatever it is. Even if you love it and you're like, wow, at the beginning I can do all of it, it's like, no, you need to think long term. So,
Yes.
sometimes when you're kind of moving along, it might be, actually, I need to have things that are, you do like bigger events. So something that I'm focusing on more at the minute is, I'm doing day retreats,
Nice.
and that allows me to have that one day where I can, we have like 4 or 5 hours with people. We can have a really amazing experience, but I'm doing this once a month
Yeah.
so I can do all the back end stuff, but then I can, gain that income of if I was doing like loads of hour classes here
Yeah.
and there. Do you know what I mean? And for me, it's like, okay, that actually works for my health a lot better. And also
Hmm.
I've done some Morocco retreats, which are long weekends. And again, it's like I'm better at, like, this is a focused time. I have to rest quite a lot in between classes and
Right.
all the activities. And then I have to rest afterwards, rest before. But it's like, this is what works for me, because you hope they're higher income things and maybe just teaching that one class. Doesn't always work out. Obviously, we always have like things that work, things that don't work.
Right.
Um, but that's something that I always try to say to people. Like, yes, teaching that one yoga class, you can't just keep teaching more and more and more. You need other things, whether
Yes.
that's one-to-ones, day retreats, something that's. I mean, I don't know what people pay in the US for a yoga class at a studio. What do people pay at the minute, like per
Are you
class?
talking about to the teacher?
Yeah, what does a teacher get at the minute?
Oh goodness, there's still studios that will pay people 25 US dollars per class. Um,
Mm, mm,
the
yeah.
highest I've ever received is probably about 50 per class, but it's somewhere within that range
Mm,
of
mm,
25 to about 50 at the high end. Um,
mm, mm,
it can go a
yeah.
little higher depending on experience and the studio itself, but
Mhm,
a
mhm.
lot of times they try to get
Yeah.
away with
But
doing the
it's
bare
trying
minimum.
to capture
Yeah.
that point. Yeah. 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 And that's not really sustainable
At
to just
all.
do lots of classes. So that's what I talk about with the mentor, and it's like, actually, you, you can't do
No.
it. You can't do it. You need to have some other packages or things where you
Mhm.
go deeper with people. You want
Yes.
something that's more transformational. Um, so yeah, I the thing is with me, we'll be talking so much about so many different things. I'll just be like, I can talk about these things for
Oh, I love it.
a lot of
I
time. But I think
love
I
it.
just want to share, because I know you have a lot of yoga teachers, and I wish I knew this
Yes.
before, at the beginning, when I was trying to teach loads of classes, kids yoga, where I was charging nothing really. And I don't know how I was thinking I was gonna live.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Um, I don't know. And also just say, like, it just because like you've been saying, you've got a job. I've had health issues. I'm trying to like figure things out. Just because you've done it for longer doesn't mean that you have the financial stability
Right.
as well. Because, things change, as we've been saying, COVID, health, your
Yeah.
situation is going to change. So I want to give people some hope. I sound like I'm a bit like,
No.
but it's the reality.
Right. But I think there is
I
still
do, I
hope
do.
that
Like
can
people
be
think,
had while still being, seated in the reality of it all. Because
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah,
is
yeah. That's a good
dangerous
way
to
to put it.
just
Yeah.
sit in
Mhm.
the fantasy world of, oh, well, I make, $50 at
Mhm.
one studio. Every studio is going to pay me that. And I really only have to teach a certain amount of
Mhm.
classes to be
Mhm.
able to make my bottom line. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not the reality of it. Not every
Mhm.
studio is going to pay you that $50, or
Yeah.
not, like if you're
Mhm.
doing things on your own, you're not always going to have 10,
Mhm.
15, 20 people showing up. You might only have
Mhm.
two. Hell, you
Yeah.
might only have one. You might
Yeah.
even not have anybody show up at all. But the reality of it
Exactly.
is like, how
Exactly.
can you
Yeah.
figure it out in a way that you're still covered without, burning
Yeah.
yourself out trying to do so
Mhm.
much, so much, so much, and also
Yeah.
living in this fantasy world that all of a sudden people are just going to show up.
Yeah.
There's effort that needs to be put in there.
Yeah.
So I wanted to actually circle back to what you
Exactly.
said about
Exactly.
which things that you see on social media and things about other teachers. Like if you see a social media
Mhm.
post of a teacher with a packed out class, congratulate them and say
Mhm.
good, great, awesome job. I aspire to that, and understand
Mhm.
that they probably did a lot
Mhm.
of behind the scenes work, or a lot of consistent showing up all
Mhm.
the time, constantly, all the time, over
Mhm.
and over,
Mhm.
even when there were only two people in the classroom. They still showed up
Mhm.
constantly, to the point where now they're at, a completely booked out class. That's the type of stuff that you end up having to do at the very beginning, is that you have to grind it out in those no show classes, those 2 to 3 people classes. Show up for them all the time, and then they'll start bringing their friends, they'll start bringing their family, they'll start telling people, or more people will start seeing, oh, okay, I see
Mhm.
you got some folks coming. Okay, post that stuff too. We don't always need to see when you have a full
Yeah.
class. We can see it when you have two
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
three or whatever,
Yeah.
and still be like, okay, yes, that looks like a good time. I want to go to the next one. Keep doing that stuff.
Mhm.
It takes
Yeah. Yeah.
work. But
Yeah.
when you see those folks with those big full
It
classes,
takes a lot of
they
work.
took the time to do that work, more than likely. So you got to do the same thing. And it's tiring, but it's
Yeah.
worth it.
Yeah. You can't know you can't know the reality of how much work is being put into that one event. And like for a yoga retreat that I do, it's going to be 9 months of work, 9 months of promotion, 9 months of marketing, of like a lot of work goes into it. But you see the nice photos on Instagram, you see me in the sun and eating nice food, and it's like that was a lot of work.
Yes.
And it may not work out because I was in Morocco, which literally had an earthquake like a month or 3 weeks before I had my retreat.
Oh my God.
So luckily where we were in Marrakesh, there was minimal damage. However, that actually impacted how many people signed up, because obviously there's a massive earthquake. You see pictures online, and that it's like the whole of Marrakesh has been flattened, and but actually the reality on the ground was like it was some very specific rural areas in the mountains. So so yeah, as a like wellness person, yoga person, retreat person, like you have acts of God
Yeah.
where things may not quite go. I did all the work, I did all the marketing, all the promotion, everything that I do for my retreats. However, it was half full.
Mm, yeah.
That's how it went. And that, I mean, seeing the earthquake was stressful because I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to cancel this retreat?
Yeah.
And that's the reality as well. You might have to. I mean, obviously with COVID, a lot of people had to cancel their retreats. But
Yeah.
I had a retreat to India that was like it was like just right at the beginning of COVID. So
Mm.
I had to cancel and refund like, I think it was maybe like 9 people.
Dang.
So it was a very, yeah, it's a roller coaster, isn't it, when you're doing these things? But you only see the good, don't you, on social media? You don't tend to post, oh, hey, everybody,
Yeah.
I've done this class and nobody's turned up.
There's so
We don't
much
usually
work
post
that
that,
goes
do
into
we?
all of this. So much work. Like even this show you're
Mm,
seeing right
mm,
now.
mm,
Y'all, I'm
mm-hmm.
tired.
Yeah, you're doing the
And I'm
editing,
and I'm really
you're
only still
planning,
at
you're
the beginning of it
preparing.
and understanding where it could
Hmm.
go. I'm like, holy shit, this is a
Hmm.
lot, but I'm willing to do
Yeah,
it because I
yeah,
do want to see it grow. So I'm going to
yeah.
keep showing up and keep
Hmm.
doing what I need to
Yeah,
do because that's my
yeah, yeah.
passion, that's my drive, and I know that there's the
Hmm.
reality
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
the behind the scenes work, the editing, the scheduling, the marketing, the posting,
Hmm.
all of
Hmm.
this stuff, but it's worth it to put that type
Yeah,
of legwork in to get to where you want to go because
hmm.
I knew just
Definitely.
from the start, I'm like,
It's
this is
worth it.
not going to
It's
be
always
some
it's
flaming
worth it.
crazy success where there's thousands of people viewing. That is absolutely asinine to think
Hmm.
that. No, 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 no. I'm going to put in my hard
Hmm.
work and keep being consistent, showing up for
Hmm.
y'all, showing up for myself, and then seeing those numbers
Hmm.
rise.
Hmm.
And that's what you have to do, even with teaching
Yeah.
classes. You
And
just
giving it
got to be there.
time,
Yes.
time is what we need, like, because I think there's this like fast, everything's fast. You
Yeah.
need to be from A to B and really grow. And it's like, no, it's the people who you've seen, you know, doing their thing. They've been learning the marketing. You've been learning how to edit. You've been just putting in all this like groundwork
Yes.
that nobody sees, nobody even really realizes. Do you know what I mean? I mean, yeah, there's probably so much work that people just have no idea.
Hmm.
But it is worth it. But it's knowing that you need to learn the skills in the background. You need to learn all the steps that you're going to have to take to get to your goal, because just doing one social media post of your class and thinking it's going to sell out is never going to, it's not going to work, I'm afraid.
At all. At all. Ooh, girl, that was. I'm so glad we
Oh,
spent time talking about that because that is stuff that folks really do need to know.
mm,
And a lot of other teachers do listen to this. So thank you for giving all of those
mm,
bits and pieces because
mm, mm,
whoo, it's not talked about enough.
mm,
And it
mm.
should so totally be a part of a 200 hour. Like
Yeah,
if you're gonna, put people
yeah.
into these things, yes, teach them the yoga, the
Mhm,
philosophy. But if you're also giving them that expectation
mhm,
of coming out of this as a teacher, understand the business side of it too,
mhm,
because you're likely going to be doing a lot of this yourself. And it's not just, I've got my
mhm.
200 hour, I will be a wild success. No.
Yeah,
So many extra elements to it.
no.
Ooh, girl. Ooh,
If only, if only.
tip of the iceberg. Ugh. Well, thank you. That
Oh,
was that was sealed in such a beautiful package now that I want to shift over into the spiritual things because I've been
mm,
on my
mm,
own journey to learn more things as well. Being,
mm, mm,
from what I understand, I am a descendant of slaves. With some other things
mhm,
mixed in going on in there. I haven't done a full, I
mhm,
don't know why I haven't done a 23andMe or anything like that, but from the
mm,
family
mm,
tree that my mom
mhm,
has painstakingly just on so many details, it gets to a point
mm,
where those records kind of stop. So it's like, that's usually an
mm,
indicator that that's what was going
mm,
on.
mm,
But
mm,
I always have felt such a
mm,
draw to spiritualism and
mhm,
mainly, things of West African and Caribbean descent. Um, I
mhm,
feel so
mhm,
drawn to it. So I've just kind of started taking my own little haphazard journey into learning things here and there.
mm,
And,
mm,
being on the little witchy side of things too. I want to know more
mhm,
about your journey through it all. Where did it start and
mm,
where is it
mm,
going?
mm, mm. Yeah, thank you for that question. So for me, I was following a Instagram or Facebook page called Ancestral Voices. So there are a couple in the UK. I think one of them, he's Ghanaian descent and the woman is Jamaican descent. And they were like, people just like posting quotes and things like this. And I don't think I even really knew it was African spirituality, to be honest. And they kept posting things that I thought, oh, I really like this. And I think I watched like they had like an introductory video of like what is African practices. And I suppose from watching that, I was like, I know a lot about Eastern practices. So I've studied Buddhism to a degree, Hinduism,
Hmm.
yoga, Vedas, and I thought, well, I know all of this, but like I literally don't know anything about African, Caribbean spiritual practices. So I think for me that was the first thing of like, wow, I don't know anything, and I've literally never even thought about it. It's never even crossed my mind
Yeah.
that the whole continent of Africa, I've never even considered all the spiritual wisdom,
Right.
wellness practice. It literally had never even crossed my mind at all. So I think that was the first thing of like, I want to understand why I've never even thought about it, why I have not, I've never come across it or had an interest. So I kind of, that was kind of a point where I was like, actually, I want to learn about this because this is a part of my ancestral lineage. And the people who came before me, they must have had some systems and
Hmm.
traditions. And, I want to kind of learn for myself because, spiritual practices is a massive interest for me. And I thought this would be a good way for me to connect to my heritage, my culture through the spiritual practices. Um, so from there, I, just like started to get books, was looking at different courses. I also set up like a book club, African Spiritual Practices book club. I started an Instagram where, things that I was learning, I shared it online because it was good because it was actually keeping me motivated to be like, okay, I'm going to do this post about obia. So I'm from a Jamaican heritage. They have obia. Um, and and looking at different like Guyana, looking at hoodoo, looking okay, what's the Akan deities, what's the Yoruba deities. So it was actually quite good where I had this Instagram because it kind of forced me to keep learning and like, oh, I think I need to research this. So I'd actually like fully look at articles, I'd read blog posts, I'd have my books, and then through that I've also been able to connect with African spiritual practitioners. So I have a friend who is an Obia practitioner, and we do workshops together for Black women. And yeah, so yeah, it's been a for me when I really started to, because obviously when you're reading it, you're like, I don't really understand this. It
Yeah.
doesn't really make sense. Like this is all so new, and you feel a little bit like oh, I'm never gonna understand this. This doesn't feel right. But once I think a thing that lots of people from enslaved people feel is like, I don't know what practice to follow.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, so, I have done a DNA test, and yes, I'm majority Nigerian, part Ghanaian, and Ivory Coast. However, in Nigeria, you have several different traditions, same in Ghana, same in Ivory
Yeah.
Coast. So technically, I don't know which particular spiritual practice I'm from. However, the more that you learn, you actually learn actually there are some principles that are across every single African spiritual practice.
Right.
So you don't necessarily have to be a into Ifa, you don't have to be a voodoo, you don't have to like, right, I'm going to be in this religion. You don't actually have to do that. You can just say, for me, my African spiritual practices is I do some divination. So I have some African goddess cards. For me, it's also the nature. Also, just learning about it, reading about it, and sharing it with other people, connecting to my ancestors, and taking some uh, wisdom from them. and also honoring my ancestors through learning, because
Mm-hmm.
actually just by taking the time to just read about it, speak to people,
Oh, yeah.
the ancestors who have gone, it's respecting them by just taking the time to learn.
Yes.
Even if you don't practice it, even if you say, you know what, that's not for me, you're showing a level of respect and remembrance as well. Because in a lot of traditions, they say, you know, when you go to the ancestral realm, if your name is, if you're not remembered, you are kind of lost. And
Yeah.
so as long as somebody in your lineage is continuing to talk about you, your spirit lives on.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, from enslaved people, we have a lot of lack of like
Yeah.
names. But it's just that of like, I'm gonna honor them. And that, so for me, following African spiritual practices and sharing it, that is a way for me to connect to my ancestors in my own way,
Mm-hmm.
and to actually say, I really want to put the right information out. I want to dispel these misinformation. I want to push back against this, like, oh, it's the devil, it's evil,
Mm-hmm.
it's all these things. And it's like, well, actually, let me read, let me educate some people and say, actually, do you know what? There's a reason why you think it's the devil. There's a reason why you think it's evil. There's a reason why you're scared of your own ancestors.
Yep.
And there's a very, I went through the process of understanding the history and like, okay, like I have some workshops that I did where me and my friend, my Obia friend, we looked at spiritual teachers. So we looked at Queen Nanny of the Maroons, who was an Obia woman. She's from Jamaica. She was like a revolutionary, very popular these days in Jamaica.
Yeah.
And also Harriet Tubman as well. And also we looked at the Haitian Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
and we were looking at these really important figures who changed history forever. They were spiritualists, they were clairvoyant, they were
Mm-hmm.
connected to nature, they received messages,
Mm.
they were prominent figures in African spiritual practices. So it's really understanding the historical context of these extremely powerful people.
Yes.
The colonizers hated them. They were the most hated, the most demonized, the most brutally punished, because they had a way of lifting people's spirits and fighting back. So when people have that, like, that fear of like, oh my gosh, like in Jamaica, it's Obia, where people are like, whoa, get your juju away from me, you're scary. It's like, that's your fear is actually probably an ancestral memory
Mm-hmm.
of, if you practice this out in public, that's the end of you. So
Right.
you're never allowed to associate with a practitioner. It's unsafe. It's the lack of safety,
Yeah.
rather than you're going to do something to me. It's like, well, actually, colonial powers have done a lot to us, but we don't have that same visceral, like, stay away.
Yeah. It's more of a social
But it's
stigma
actually
at this
like
point
they were,
now. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it is. So that's my, African spiritual traditions, and just trying to really develop the research. So this is just me on my own with my books, watching the YouTube channels, but really wanting to. So today I have been applying for this fellowship to do some travel and some research. So maybe I hope I'm gonna be
Oh, yeah.
successful and be able to like keep developing and expanding that knowledge so I can actually share it with others who are interested.
Yes, indeed. Because I was already about to ask him, like, okay, name of the book club again was African Spiritual Practices Book Club.
Yeah, so the book club, we've had a long break, but I have an Instagram which is African Spiritual Practices or Traditions. I will African Spiritual. I'll have to double check whether it's practices or traditions.
Okay, yeah, and I'll
And that's
I'll
got
help. I'll
a lot of posts.
sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's got just loads of information that I've posted over the years.
Yes.
resources, podcasts, things like that. I haven't been as active because I'm trying to work on my other
Yeah.
things. But yeah, it's all there. It's all like I try to research what I post,
Hmm.
and also I'm open to dialogue with people who are from within them tradition. So people say, actually, do you know what? I'm actually Yoruba. This is not really how it
Yeah.
is. You might have a bit of misunderstanding. So I definitely open to. I'm not the expert. I'm just somebody who likes to learn. I'm a geek, basically.
Preaching to the choir over here.
That's
Whew.
why I am.
Man, because I was as soon as you said book club, I'm like, okay, then the list of books must be there. Because I sure was about to like, can you give me some few titles?
Mm-hmm.
But we can talk about that a whole other day.
Mm-mm.
Man,
Yeah.
you've already given so much amazing insight that normally I ask the question of what advice would you give to new instructors? So we've already pretty much covered that through this entire
Mm-hmm.
episode.
Yeah.
What I
Yeah.
would also like for
Mm-hmm.
you to
Mm-hmm.
provide is any advice to folks looking to start their practice in general.
Mm. So people who wanting to start out in yoga,
Hmm.
um,
Yoga, spiritualism, any of it.
or any, yeah. Well, I suppose part of it is finding a teacher, finding teachers. So I would try and learn from lots of different people if you have the like if it's available to you,
Mhm.
if you have the resources. Um, yeah, I would definitely say broaden your horizons, try new things, go to classes, different practitioners. Also, what I do want to say is if you can learn, because yoga is a South Asian practice, so go and find the teachers from the South Asian lineage who maybe had it within their family, within their heritage.
Mhm.
Um, if you can find books by South Asian people, yeah, yeah. And if you can, that will give you a very different perspective, although it doesn't always mean it's going to be more authentic.
Ooh,
Um,
good point.
for some very, very lots of different reasons. But it's important that we, as practitioners of yoga, that we respect and elevate the people where it's actually come from, because this practice has been preserved for thousands of years
Yes.
by people in the Indian subcontinent. So, we need to remember that, and we can do that by seeking out teachers, putting our money to the teachers who actually that's their culture, that's their heritage.
Yes.
Thinking about the music that you listen to. Is it a white person mispronouncing mantras, which really annoys me? Duh! That literally like drove
Whew.
me. So yeah, so like what? So yeah, the music that you're playing in classes, like, or just if you're starting out as a complete newbie, maybe just go onto YouTube, and listen, type in mantras, or there's like seminars and classes and
Yes.
things like that where you can just go, and it's a lot of it is available. um some of it is going to be better quality than others, so that's where I say try to broaden your horizons, because not everybody's teaching yoga. Some people are just teaching their own mishmash of whatever they feel like it, to sell
Yep.
to you. So, maybe it's you get a recommendation. That's always a good way. And also, if you're starting out in yoga, think you might want to think about what it is that you want out of your yoga practice. So,
Yeah.
do you want stress relief? Do you want relaxation? Find the classes related to that. If you need to like really, you have a lot of energy, you need to sweat, then you need to find yoga that is suitable. If you're more spiritual, maybe you want to think about some of the texts that you might like to
Right.
explore. But maybe as a newbie, the texts can be a little bit intense, I would say.
Yeah. I feel like the where you're going with all of this is have that curiosity to learn and learn from so many
Mhm.
different places
Yeah.
and people, especially when it comes to
Mhm.
the type of yoga that you're actually looking to participate in. Because if it's anything from that South Asian tradition,
Mhm.
absolutely find some folks from the
Mhm.
tradition
Mhm.
to learn from. And I love
Mhm. Mhm.
I love that you
Yeah.
gave that point of it not always being an authentic experience just because it's from someone of the culture.
Mhm.
I appreciate that because it does.
Mhm.
Again, this is something that we could have a whole other discussion on, but the colonialism aspect
Yeah.
of what it has done to the yoga practice, not only in the UK and the
Mhm.
US, but in India itself.
Mhm.
It's become such a
Yeah.
commodity rather than an actual spiritual
Mhm.
healing thing that even folks of the culture have
Yeah.
adopted some of these things too. So you do really need to practice discernment on where
Yeah.
you're getting your yoga from, regardless of
Yes.
where it's coming from. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that up because,
Mhm.
oh, that's
Mhm.
not talked about enough.
Yeah. It's a bit of a tricky one because we use the internet and some bigger yoga teachers who I've known or friends have worked with, they're not authentic with what they post and who they are as people. So
Mhm.
um, it really is a kind of really exploring. You really need to go out and just try and find as many teachers that you can learn from. And I
Yes.
think, trust in yourself as well.
Mm.
If somebody's really forcing you and pushing you into something you don't feel comfortable with, have your own autonomy,
Mm.
have your own bodily autonomy, mind autonomy, and say, actually, no, that's not for me. And that's okay. If a teacher's going to try and, you know, they're not ethically okay, you're within your right to say, I'm going to take a step back. I don't agree with this. This is pushing a boundary.
Mhm.
No, trust yourself. Your teacher is a guide, but you know yourself better than that teacher.
Yes. Whew, Emma. Emma, you just made this the most fire season finale. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't make note
Oh,
of that earlier.
amazing.
This is the season 4 finale episode, so y'all just
Oh,
got one hell of
amazing.
a treat with this one. Cause man, oh man, did you just spit so much hot fire. I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day, even with the time zone difference and everything. I really appreciate this
Mm,
so much, and I'm so glad that we got
mm,
to
mm,
connect.
It's been
Oh,
wonderful. I really have loved speaking to you. And yeah, I appreciate you and what you're doing. It's very important, giving people platforms. So I appreciate all the work, all that
thank
other
you.
editing and things you're doing in the background.
Thank you
It's
so
amazing.
much. Y'all always trying to make me cry. Stop it, stop it, stop it.
Oh.
No, do you have anything that you would like to plug at this time?
Yeah, so I am available for mentoring, one-to-one mentoring. Um, and that I think maybe I'm going to send you my website
Yeah.
and details. So I do have the one-to-one mentoring available. I don't know on when this is coming out, but I do have a retreat to India in January.
Oh,
So it's right at the beginning of January. So it's the 6th to the 12th to Goa.
okay.
So when is this coming
This
out? Is it
will
going to be
it'll
December?
be in December, like the week before Christmas. Let me see what the
Yeah.
date is exactly.
Oh,
Yeah, the
okay.
19th.
Well, if there's spaces for the go, yeah. So if you're interested in coming to Goa for a really amazing spiritual retreat, we do have some Indian yoga teachers who's coming. We have the option to go dolphin spotting. We can do some Indian cookery classes. We're right
Ooh,
on the Arabian Sea.
yes.
So if you need some like really, really like amazing self care, first of all. You need some rest, you need some rejuvenation, but you also want to explore, your life purpose and moving forwards in your life. Please do reach out about my retreat to Goa because it's amazing. Basically,
Yes.
I will plug myself.
Absolutely. Toot that horn. Oh man, y'all heard it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Go run it up, get your retreat on, and get your mentorship, because
Hmm.
clearly she got it
Hmm.
going on. Like, she gets spit so much free game right now. Just imagine what you will get going one on one. Like, come on. Come
Oh,
on.
thank you.
Yes, thank you all so much, especially to you, Emma, but also a big thank you to you listeners out there. I can't tell you when season 5 is coming, but just know it's gonna be here. So if you are interested on being in the show, you know where to go, the website, sign up on the wait list. But I'll give you all those details in just a moment. Y'all, enjoy the rest of your day, week, month, year, whatever it is before you listen to this. Happy holidays to you all, whatever it is that you celebrate. I appreciate you more than you know. Thank you guys so, so much. Bye. Well, folks, this wraps up season 4. And again, cannot thank you enough for your support throughout this entire season, this entire year. I hope you had as much fun as I did, learning so much more about every guest, even getting all of these tips and tricks and details. It was such a phenomenal time. If you're interested in being on the show in 2024, be sure to head over to www.yogainblack.net to get set up onto our waitlist. But also be sure to follow us on all our social medias. We've got Instagram, yoga.inblack, Facebook, yoga in black, TikTok, yoga.in.black, of course, our website. And if you need to reach out via email, you can reach out to admin@yogainblack.net. Again, thank you so much. Happy holidays, Merry New Year, and I will see you in 2024.